Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura have begun a Fischer random match in Oslo. They're playing 8 rapid games, or fairly rapid, 45 minutes on the clock to get to move 40, then 15 minutes after that. So 8 of those games, and then they're going to be playing 8 pretty speedy games with just 10 minutes on the clock. So yesterday they played the first 2 games, and they were told the starting position 15 minutes before play began. In Fischer random chess, basically the baseline of pieces is shuffled, you can see here, to normal chess players' eyes. It is indeed pretty random. So it's a way of just getting rid of all this opening theory, which many people think is kind of dragging the game down. There's too much preparation. So it's a very interesting experiment. Of course, Fischer random chess has been around for some time, and Hikaru Nakamura is, I think, recognized as one of the leading experts in this play. He plays matches online sometimes with this and has very good results. And a few years ago in Mainz in Germany, he was very successful in matches in Fischer random chess. So the organisers are describing this match as an unofficial world championship. Nakamura has, as I said, a very good reputation with this kind of chess, and of course Magnus Carlsen is the world champion in classical chess. So it's an intriguing contest. Let's look at game 1. So as I said, the players had 15 minutes to get their heads around this position. Carlsen was white, and he opened with pawn to c4. Well, in fact, looking at this game, it seems to me that the kind of basic opening principles of classical chess still very much hold for Fischer random chess. Of course, it's called Fischer random chess because it was Bobby Fischer's idea. So the principles still apply. Basically, before you get your knights out, you need to give them cover with a pawn. Otherwise, the knights would be pushed away by your opponent's pawn. So actually, it's very classical. So the knights come out very often first, and the bishops, they can hold back and wait to get to a good diagonal. This first game, I have to say, was a little bit disappointing. After these opening moves, as you can see, it's already a very symmetrical position, symmetrical pawn structure, and there are a lot of trades. And let me just go on a little bit further and show you the castling rule, because this is something that is a little bit hard to understand at first. So here, both sides castled. First of all, Nakamura at this end of the board, so you can see we've got a normal castled kingside position, and Carlsen did the same here. Basically, wherever king and rook are on the baseline, they switch places and end up in the normal casting position on kingside or queenside. So yes, quick action replay. Rook in the corner just comes over this side. Both sides do it. So anyway, we've got a very symmetrical position, not very interesting. After a few more moves, lots of pieces traded, they reached this position. It's obviously completely drawn. The players continued, and they finally agreed to draw in this position. Absolutely nothing to do. So, okay, a quiet start. Game 2, that was more interesting. So they're playing with the same arrangement of pieces on the baseline, but the players had an hour and a half in between the first game and the second game, and they used that time to prepare. And they could use computers to prepare if they wanted to. But there's not much detailed analysis you can do in that time. and certainly, computers are not going to be able to give you a definitive answer to this kind of position with all the pieces on the board. It's more getting your head round the position. So instead of c4, Nakamura with white started with e4. So potentially letting that bishop out. And Carlsen played, well, a Sicilian. Again, it's not really very different from classical chess. Pawn structure is incredibly important. And this also prepares to bring out the knight to c6. So this is, well, in some ways, a very normal position, actually. d4 from Nakamura, so it's an open Sicilian now. And now c4, and actually this is already a critical moment in the game, because if white is able to consolidate his position with, let's say, knight c3, and then bringing this knight into the game, potentially to e3, then this so-called Marozzi bind with the pawns on e4 and c4, this is already a very, very pleasant position. So it's vital that Carlsen prepares to strike back, and that's what he did. Well, he didn't prepare it, he just did it. And this is the very often the standard way of breaking down white's clamp in the centre of the board. b5, excellent move. And round about here, well, I was already thinking that Carlsen is doing fine with black, having broken down this white centre. Nevertheless, white does have a lead in development, and this bishop move just makes life slightly awkward for black. So obviously attacking the rook in the corner. I suppose that the obvious move is to put the bishop in the way, but after this, well, again, we're reaching actually a very normal kind of position. I suppose the only thing that's not normal is this rook in the corner, but you can get that out actually. Well, you could castle, but actually bringing it out around the side is very attractive. To possibly come here, I mean, it might also switch over to the c file at some moment. White has certainly the more comfortable position there. So in answer to bishop c3, I thought maybe pawn to e5 actually, blocking out the bishop, but also taking away this d4 square from white's pieces. I think white has a slightly more comfortable position, but it seems to me that that's reasonable for black. But Carlsen played in a much more double-edged way. He played f6. I don't think it's a beautiful move because this diagonal is a bit open, and for the moment this bishop doesn't look terribly good. But there's method in his madness. Method is in his madness. There we go. h4. Again, white could play a normal move here and just castle. Wow, I'm glad my software recognises that move. And we got a pretty normal position. It seems to me that white is a bit better here. But Nakamura played h4 and again did this maneuver with the rook, bringing the rook out via the side. And it's interesting because he's showing that black's king position is a little bit sensitive, looking at this. Now, an interesting move from Carlsen, knight e5, and suddenly bishop h6 might be coming, and black has counterplay. So this is his big idea. And Nakamura made a very pragmatic decision here, just taking off that active knight, giving up the bishops, but you can see, well, we're about to see, that white is far better coordinated, at least the rooks are better coordinated than black's. You can see at the moment that black's rooks are split, and that creates some problems. For example, if Carlsen were to trade pieces here, trade queens here, then white simply has a lead in development, and this is just better for white. So yeah, the rook needs to be over this side of the board. And if f takes, which is normally the move you'd like to make, taking towards the centre, then Carlsen didn't like the look of queen g5. He felt his queen was too far away from the defence, which is, well, yeah, this is practical chess. I mean, the time control is pretty fast, so, you know, they have to go on intuition. So Carlsen recaptured with the d-pawn, but the rook swings across the board, and basically white is better coordinated. He has the initiative. And this is a little bit uncomfortable for black. Maybe queen c2 is better than knight d2 here, but this is also not bad. Bishop h6. So this bishop does finally reach actually a pretty decent diagonal. So black's bishops are not bad here, but the rook is active and black is certainly worse here. I mean, maybe it's an idea just to castle. Give this pawn and play a5 to hassle this knight. Black has compensation, but I can understand why Carlsen was reluctant to allow this rook to remain on the 7th. So he played queen b8. Queen c2. Yeah, incidentally, there are problems here. If rook takes pawn, then we can come back and you can see that rook is in trouble. So queen c2 protecting the rook, and now castles. Difficult to get your head around this castling. And once again, well, there are problems if white were to capture this pawn. Rook e7, the rook comes across first of all, hitting the queen, and then bishop f8, and again the rook is in trouble. So instead, Nakamura played an excellent move, bishop a6, preventing exchanges with rook c8 and, you know, controlling a very important square, and also, you know, the b7 square as well. Carlsen put the brakes on. He exchanged and played rook d8. So he's activating. And now this is actually maybe the most critical moment in the game, because here Nakamura has a big decision. He could take this pawn, and of course he was analysing this position and the consequences of rook takes pawn. So let me just go into a little bit of detail. Why did Nakamura reject this move? Well, he saw this line. Queen d6, attacking rook, attacking knight. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes knight. So for the moment, black is a knight ahead. But now comes queen c7, attacking the knight, attacking the bishop, also looking at the rook as well, although it's defended. Now he saw rook d7, and then queen takes knight. We'll come back to this position. So white gets the piece back, and now he saw that after queen takes pawn, black has sufficient play for a draw. So for example, a4, check, and well, if bishop f1, then pin and win. And if king h2, then queen takes pawn, hitting here and, well, threatening lots of things really. And black certainly has sufficient counterplay there. But if we come back to this position, so remember, white has just played queen c7, black plays rook d7, but here white throws in a check. And this makes a massive difference with the king on g7, not on g8. So trades. Okay, what's the difference in the position? Here, it's not going to be possible for black to use that bishop. So after this check, the bishop comes back. There's no bishop c4 because it's pinned. That's the difference. And here, that a pawn is just too strong. Subtle difference. So that's what Nakamura overlooked. Coming back to this position after queen c7, apologies, this is enormous depth, but it's an important position. Carlsen can do better. He could play a check, and then play this. And I think white is definitely better in this position, but black has counterplay. He's threatening this. He's actually threatening the a pawn as well. This would give Carlsen better chances to find counterplay and draw the position. So very complicated, but that probably represented Nakamura's best chance to win the game. Instead, he played knight f1. He didn't want to head down a drawing line. Rook d7. Now the danger has largely passed for Carlsen. In this position, well, he could have still traded and played queen c7, and that still maybe a little bit better for white, but instead Nakamura played b4, and this was a misjudgment. They didn't have much time, and suddenly it's Carlsen with black that has a little bit of initiative here, because his queen is simply beautifully centralized, and this is a little bit uncomfortable. But Carlsen also didn't make the best of his chances. He should play queen c3 and put the knight on d4, and that gives him the best chances. I mean, what he did also looks attractive, but it's not quite as good as that continuation. You can see the queen is a little bit better placed here, controlling this square and looking in this direction. And Nakamura succeeded in finding enough counterplay to make a draw. I mean, Carlsen maybe could have improved somewhere along the lines here, but he just took this pawn. And here, although black is a pawn up, you can see the queen just for a moment is sidelined, and white has enough play to make a draw here. Yeah, the king lacks protection basically, and needs to keep hold of the e-pawn, but then it's open to checks, so that position is a draw. So that game was definitely more intriguing than the first, and well, a quite original position was reached. So yeah, that was a more interesting one. So 6 more games to go with this semi-rapid time control, and yeah, those games are going to be played over the next 3 days. So tune in and let's keep an open mind on this form of chess.